What would you do if you stumbled across a video online? Some sleazy, grainy clip buried on one of those sketchy adult movie sites of multiple guys taking turns with your wife. I'm not asking as some hypothetical scenario. Imagine it. You're scrolling, maybe out of boredom, curiosity, or because you're just killing time. And then bam, there she is. You recognize everything. Her body, the way she moves, the sound of her moans. It's unmistakable. That's your wife, getting used like she's the star of the show, surrounded by men you've never seen before, and she's loving every second of it. What do you do? How do you even begin to process something like that? That's how it started for me. Not with a creeping suspicion or some subtle clue, but with a damn video that turned my life inside out. If you think I reacted like some badass hero, you're dead wrong. I didn't do a thing. I froze, completely stunned. I tried to pause the video, only to accidentally hit replay, watching it all over again. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even click the right buttons. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the moment where everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. But to explain how I got that far, I need to start from the beginning. You need to understand what my life looked like before it all went to hell. Otherwise, none of this will make sense. I'm Mike, just an ordinary guy with a pretty low-key life. I work in IT fixing other people's problems, troubleshooting their messes, keeping things running. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and it gives me enough free time to enjoy the simple things. I've always been a steady guy, not the type to chase thrills or get caught up in drama. I like my routine, my predictability. That was the life I wanted, something I could count on. And for a long time, I thought I had that with my wife, Melanie. We'd been together for years, married for 6 of them. She worked at a big marketing firm, one of those sleek places where people are always on edge, juggling deadlines and trying to outdo each other. She loved it though. Melanie thrived on stress. She'd come home fired up, ranting about clients and coworkers, her voice full of energy. Most of the time, I'd just nod and listen half-heartedly. I didn't think any of it mattered. Her work was her thing, my job was mine. I never thought for a second that what happened in her office would end up blowing my life apart. We weren't perfect, obviously. No marriages. We had our share of arguments about stupid things, like whose turn it was to take out the trash, or whether I spent too much time on my computer. Sometimes they got heated. I'd slam doors, she'd storm off. But the thing about us was, no matter how ugly things got, we always had sex to fall back on. And it wasn't just routine, go through the motions sex. It was passionate, raw, and frequent. We were the kind of couple who couldn't keep their hands off each other. I thought that was a sign we were still connected, that we were doing fine, even if everything else wasn't always perfect. Even when things started changing about a year ago, I didn't think much of it. At first, the sex just became a little less frequent. Nothing drastic, just going from almost every day to once a week. Then it stretched to every couple of weeks. When we did have sex, it felt different, less intense, like she was just going through the motions. Sometimes, after we were done, she'd roll over and grab her phone without a word, scrolling through messages like I wasn't even there. I told myself it was normal. Life gets in the way. We were getting older, busier. She was working longer hours, and I figured she was just tired. I thought, every couple has dry spells. It'll pass. So, I gave her space. I didn't want to be the guy who nagged his wife for sex. I figured if I was patient, things would go back to how they were. But they didn't. I started trying harder, planning surprise dates, cooking her favorite meals, picking up flowers on random days just to make her smile. She always acted grateful, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You're so sweet, babe." But it never led to anything more. She'd still be glued to her phone or lost in work emails, acting like there was always something more important than us. That damn phone. I should have seen it coming. She was always on it. Morning, noon, and night. She wouldn't even leave it on the nightstand when we went to bed anymore. I'd hear it buzz late at night, and she'd snatch it up like it was some urgent emergency. "Just work stuff," she'd say, flashing me that quick, dismissive smile that always made me feel like an idiot for even asking. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wasn't the kind of guy to pry or snoop. I never checked her messages or asked too many questions. I thought trust was supposed to be the foundation of a marriage, so I tried my best to give her the benefit of the doubt. I figured she was stressed, maybe a little overwhelmed. But I didn't know then what I know now, that she was already slipping away from me. She started dressing differently, too. Tighter skirts, blouses that showed a little more skin. I told myself it was just part of her job. Marketing is all about appearances, right? But it didn't feel right. She wasn't dressing like that for me anymore. It was like she was putting on a show for someone else, and I was too blind to see it. Then came the late nights at work. Those became more frequent, too. Just a client dinner, she'd say, or we got a big project deadline coming up. She'd come home late, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, with a buzz in her voice like she'd had one too many drinks. I never questioned her. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, the guy who grills his wife every time she walks through the door. Looking back, I can't believe how naive I was. All the signs were there, plain as day. But I ignored them. I convinced myself we were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better. Couples have ups and downs, right? That's what I told myself. Except this wasn't just a rough patch. This was something else, something I never saw coming. And the worst part? I didn't realize any of it until it was too late. I guess it all really started when the sex slowed down between us. I mean, when you go from being all over each other to barely touching, it messes with your head. You start thinking, what's wrong with me? Is she not attracted to me anymore? And when the person you're supposed to be closest to pulls away, you find other ways to fill that void. For me, that meant diving deeper into adult movies. Not something I'm exactly proud of, but hey, I figured it was harmless. I told myself, it's just a way to blow off steam. Everyone does it, right? It started small, once a week, maybe twice. But as the weeks went on, and Melanie got more distant, I found myself doing it more often. She'd leave for work, and I'd have the place to myself. I'd pull up one of those shady sites, find a video, and get it out of my system. No big deal. It's not like I was cheating or anything. I was just compensating for what I wasn't getting at home. Then came that day. The day everything shattered. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. Melanie was at work, and I was sitting on the couch, bored out of my mind. I figured, why not? I grabbed my laptop, set it on the coffee table in front of me, and picked up a box of tissues. It wasn't exactly my proudest moment, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? I clicked into one of those free adult movie sites. Nothing fancy, just the usual collection of thumbnails, most of which blurred together after a while. I didn't even bother scrolling. I just clicked on the first video that popped up. Some amateur stuff. That's usually what I went for. Something real, not those fake, overproduced setups. The video started playing, and at first it was just background noise. A few guys in a room, chatting with a woman who had her back to the camera. But then she turned around, and my heart stopped. I froze. My stomach dropped. It was Melanie, or someone who looked exactly like her. For a second, I told myself it had to be some weird coincidence. I mean, people have doppelgangers, right? It happens. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself that this woman just happened to have the same face, the same wavy brown hair, the same body. But the longer I watched, the harder it was to deny what I was seeing. The way she moved, her expressions, it was all too familiar. Then I thought, maybe it's a deep fake. You've probably heard of those, right? Some crazy AI program where they slap someone's face onto a video. I figured, yeah, that's gotta be it. Someone's messing around, and it's just a coincidence that this woman looks so much like my wife. But as the video kept playing, it became harder to keep lying to myself. It wasn't just the face. It was everything. Her voice, her mannerisms, even the way she bit her lip when she was nervous. There were too many little details that only I would know. Things you can't fake, no matter how good the tech is. The guys in the video started getting handsy, and there she was laughing like she was having the time of her life. Not embarrassed, not uncomfortable, just enjoying herself. I felt like I was going to throw up. I paused the video, heart pounding in my chest, and clicked on the profile that uploaded it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. I figured if this is a prank or some weird mistake, the profile will prove it. But it didn't. There were dozens of videos, all of them featuring her. Sometimes with one guy, sometimes with several. Some of the thumbnails were so graphic I couldn't bring myself to click them. It was her. It was really her. I sat there, stunned, not knowing what the hell to do. My whole body went numb. My mind was racing, but I couldn't grab onto a single coherent thought. I just kept scrolling through the profile, hoping that somehow, some way, this was all a mistake. But it wasn't. I must have stared at that screen for hours, unable to move, unable to think, just frozen. Every part of me wanted to shut the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But I couldn't. I couldn't unsee it. I didn't know what the hell to do. My mind was spinning, and every thought I tried to grab on it just slipped away like smoke. My hands were still shaking, and my heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I needed to talk to someone now. I needed advice, clarity, anything that would make this nightmare make sense. So, without thinking, I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person I trusted enough to share something like this with, my buddy, Eric. Eric's been my friend since college. One of those guys you can tell anything to without worrying about judgment. He's the kind of guy who always seems to have an answer, even if it's not the right one. I needed someone like that in that moment. Someone to just tell me what the hell to do. When he picked up, I blurted out, "You busy, man? I need to meet. Like now." "Whoa, what's going on?" he asked, his voice suddenly serious. "I can't explain over the phone. Just, can you meet me at Joe's?" In 20. He must have heard the panic in my voice because he didn't ask any more questions. "Yeah, I'll be there. Everything okay?" "No," I muttered, hanging up before he could press further. I threw on a jacket, not even sure if I looked presentable, and drove to the bar. My mind was still racing, jumping from one thought to another. I kept seeing those videos in my head, Melanie's face, her voice, the way she moved with those men, like she didn't have a care in the world. How could I have missed all this? How could I have been so blind? When I walked into Joe's, Eric was already at a booth, 2 beers waiting on the table. I slid in across from him and grabbed mine, taking a long gulp before saying anything. "So what's going on?" he asked, leaning forward. I hesitated. "How the hell do you tell your best friend? You just found out your wife stars in amateur adult movies." I rubbed my face, trying to find the right words, but they wouldn't come. Finally, I just said it. "Melanie. She's in these videos, man. I found them today." Eric blinked, not quite understanding. "What do you mean, videos?" I took another swig of beer, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. "Like adult videos. Dozens of them. I found them online, her with other guys." His eyes widened, and for a second, he just stared at me, probably waiting for me to laugh and say it was some sick joke. But I didn't. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, leaning back in his seat. "What the hell? I don't know what to do, man." My voice cracked a little, and I hated how desperate I sounded. I'm losing my mind here. Do I confront her? Do I kick her out? What the hell do I do? Eric took a sip of his beer, thinking. He always took his time with these things, which drove me nuts, but I needed someone to be calm right then. "Look, I know you want to go home and tear into her," he said finally. "But if you do that, you'll never know the whole story. You act now, in the heat of the moment, and you'll break up, sure, but you'll be left wondering how far this thing really went. What else you missed?" I nodded, biting my lip. As much as I hated hearing it, he was right. I couldn't just barge in and blow everything up, not yet. If I did, I'd never get the answers I needed. I needed to know. I had to know how deep this betrayal went. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice low. "You play it cool," Eric said. "You find out what's really going on, quietly. Figure out how far it's gone, how long it's been happening. Once you know the whole picture, then you decide what to do." I hated the idea of staying quiet, of pretending everything was normal when inside I was falling apart. But Eric was right. I couldn't just blow up my marriage without knowing the full story. I needed answers. I finished my beer in one long gulp and nodded. "Okay, I'll do that. I'll figure it out." The first step was figuring out where she spent her time. If she wasn't at work, where the hell was she filming those videos? I couldn't exactly come out and ask her, so I had to start somewhere. The next morning, I decided to drop by her office. If nothing else, I figured I'd confirm she was at work, doing what she always said she was doing. I pulled into the parking lot of her building, my heart hammering in my chest. I'd been here a couple of times before, picking her up after late meetings, dropping off lunch when I had the day off. It looked the same as always. Busy, ordinary, nothing to suggest my life was falling apart. Inside, I walked up to the receptionist, trying to act casual. "Hey, I'm just here to drop something off for Melanie. Is she in?" The receptionist gave me a polite but confused smile. Melanie? Oh, she doesn't work here anymore. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. What do you mean? She quit about 8 months ago, the receptionist said, tilting her head. She left on her own. I think she said something about needing a break or pursuing other opportunities. 8 months. I stood there, stunned, the pieces slowly clicking into place. She hadn't worked here for 8 months. For 8 months, she'd been lying to me. Every time she left for work, every late-night meeting, every client dinner, it was all bullshit. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I mumbled some excuse and walked out of the building, my legs numb. 8 months. I thought back to everything that had happened in that time. Every argument, every cold night in bed, every time I told myself it was just a rough patch. All the while, she'd been doing what? Filming those videos? Living a double life? I stood there in the parking lot, staring at the sky, wondering when my marriage had fallen apart. When had everything I thought I knew about my life turned into a lie? And how the hell did I miss it? I couldn't let it go. After finding out she hadn't worked at that marketing firm for 8 months, I knew there had to be more. That was just the surface, the first crack in what turned out to be a much bigger lie. I had to dig deeper. If I wanted to know how long this had been going on, and what the hell had driven her to do it, I needed access to her world. I needed to know everything she had kept from me. Getting into her phone wasn't an option. Melanie guarded that thing like it was the nuclear codes, and I wasn't about to grab it off the nightstand and hope for the best. But then I remembered she had a backup social media account. One of those accounts she only used occasionally, mostly to keep in touch with old friends. She hadn't logged in from her laptop in a long time, which meant her login credentials were still saved there. So one night, after she went to sleep, I opened her old laptop. It had been gathering dust in the closet for months. I booted it up and went straight to that social network, praying the password autofill still worked. And just like that, I was in. Her profile looked innocent enough. Just a handful of photos and the usual fluff, vacation pictures, motivational quotes, photos of food. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I wasn't looking for that. I needed to know what was buried in her messages. I opened her inbox and started scrolling. At first, it was underwhelming. Just random exchanges with acquaintances, birthday greetings, and a few chats with girlfriends about harmless stuff. But something fell off. There was almost nothing about her work, like it had been wiped clean from her life. No rants about deadlines, no complaints about her boss, no small talk with colleagues. It was as if she never discussed her job with anyone, which made no sense. People always vent about work, especially in private chats. It felt like she'd either hidden everything from this account or wiped out every trace. But why? The more I scrolled, the weirder it seemed. It was almost like she'd lived a double life. Maybe she had a burner phone, or maybe she just deleted every work-related message to cover her tracks. Either way, she'd gone to great lengths to keep me, and everyone else, out of that part of her life. Then I stumbled on a string of old messages tucked way back in the archives. Messages from over a year ago, long before everything started falling apart. She'd been chatting with an old friend, someone named Brittany, an old roommate from her college days, if I remembered right. And that's when I found it. The first clue that my wife had been planning this for far longer than I realized. At first, it was just idle conversation. Melanie complained about her boss, the usual stuff. But then, the messages took a turn. I swear, Britt, I can't do this job anymore. It's sucking the life out of me. You think I'm kidding, but I fantasize about quitting every single day. Just packing my stuff and walking out. Her friend responded with sympathy, offering advice about maybe taking a break or switching companies. But Melanie wasn't interested in the typical career moves. She had something else in mind. I've been thinking about doing something different. Something crazy. Brittany asked what she meant, and Melanie hesitated for a few lines before finally spelling it out. Have you ever thought about the adult film industry? I sat there, reading that line over and over, hoping I was misinterpreting it. But I wasn't. There it was in black and white. She wasn't joking. She wasn't just venting. She had considered it seriously. And not just recently. This was from over a year ago. Long before the distance between us grew. Before the sex slowed down. Before I had any reason to suspect that she was hiding anything. She'd been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe even planning it. The messages continued, with Melanie explaining that she wanted to quit her job, but didn't want to settle for another boring 9 to 5. She wanted something that would give her freedom and excitement, something where she could be in control. I know it sounds crazy, but I just want to feel alive again, she wrote. Brittany didn't seem shocked. Instead, she asked Melanie if she was sure about it, if she really wanted to go down that path. Melanie's response made my stomach turn. I think I do. I mean, why not? It's just another kind of work, right? I slammed the laptop shut, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there, trying to process what I'd just read. Melanie had been planning this for over a year. She'd thought about quitting her job, not to escape stress or burnout, but because she wanted something more exciting. She wanted something different. And for some reason, she never told me. Why the hell didn't she talk to me about any of this? If she was unhappy at work, why didn't she come to me? We were supposed to be partners, right? We were supposed to talk about these things. I would have understood. I would have helped her find a new job, anything to make her happy. But instead, she kept it all to herself. And now I was sitting here, reading about it like some outsider. It wasn't just the betrayal of her actions. It was the fact that she'd shut me out of her life long before any of this happened. I had no idea when our marriage had started falling apart. Was it a year ago? 2 years? Had she ever really been happy with me? Or was she always looking for something more? Something I couldn't give her? And now I was left with the pieces, trying to make sense of a puzzle I didn't even know I was part of. I sat there all night, staring at the screen, feeling the betrayal cut deeper with every word I'd read. The messages, the lies, the videos, it was all too much. It wasn't just that Melanie had gone behind my back. It was that she had made this choice, planned this life, and never once thought to tell me. I felt like a complete idiot, and the anger simmering inside me started to boil over. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. I needed to do something. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. If she thought she could humiliate me by living this double life, then I was going to make sure the world knew exactly who she really was. Revenge might not solve anything, but in that moment, it was all I could think about. I knew what I had to do. I opened her social media account again and stared at it, feeling my pulse pound in my ears. Then I started typing. I made it look innocent enough, like I had just stumbled across the information on her profile. Hey everyone, not sure if you've seen this, but it looks like Melanie's taken a pretty unexpected career turn. She's been working in the adult film industry for the last few months. It's wild how people reinvent themselves, right? It was petty, sure, but I didn't care. I wanted to hit her where it hurt, to tear down the perfect little facade she'd been hiding behind. Once I hit post, I knew there was no going back. I set the phone down, heart racing, and waited. It didn't take long. The post spread like wildfire. Comments started rolling in within minutes. Friends, family, co-workers, all reacting with shock and judgment. What the hell, Melanie? Is this a joke? I can't believe this. What happened to you? The condemnation came fast and brutal, like a tidal wave. People were tagging her, asking if it was true, expressing their disgust and disbelief. And the best part? No one suspected it was me who leaked the information. I made it look like it was already out there, just waiting to be discovered. About an hour later, I heard the front door swing open, and Melanie stormed in, her face pale with panic. What the hell did you do? She hissed, holding up her phone. Why would you post that? Where did you even get that from? I shrugged, playing dumb. From your social media, obviously. It was all right there if you knew where to look. Her eyes went wide with disbelief. That's not true. I never. She stopped herself, realizing she was trapped. Why are you doing this, Mike? Please, we can talk about this. I stood up, my heart pounding with adrenaline. Talk about what, Melanie? About how you've been lying to me for over a year. Or how you quit your job to go film videos with other men without telling me. What exactly do you want to talk about? Tears welled in her eyes, and she stepped closer, trying to take my hand. I made mistakes, okay? I was lost, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. But we can fix this. I love you, Mike. Please, let's work through this. I pulled my hand away, disgusted. It's too late for that. I'm filing for divorce. She froze, the color draining from her face. Please don't do this. I'll quit. I'll delete everything. Just don't end things like this. I shook my head, my voice cold. You ended this marriage the moment you decided to lie to me. There's nothing left to fix. She sobbed quietly as she scrolled through her phone, frantically trying to delete the post. But it was already too late. Once something is out there, it's out there forever. The fallout was swift. Her family reached out, demanding explanations. Friends she'd known for years cut ties without a second thought. People who used to admire her now saw her as nothing more than a disgrace. Her phone didn't stop buzzing for days. Texts, calls,